Adam Yahuza and Ridwan Fasasi. The moderator is Ridwan Fasasi. The writer, author is Adam Yahuza. Please clap hand for Jesus, please. Oh, clap hand for writers, please.
I do write, but not like it wasn't like official. I wasn't serious with it. I was just playing with words for when he died. And there is this story behind it. Because those that know him, I have brothers here that know him, that grew up with him, they could relate to this story. When he entered his home, on his walls, he have like all his love notes written on his walls. So I enter his room and I'll be like, all these love letters for who? Then you enter, there are enough to read. And after his death, something happened. That was when I started writing. I could remember he edited my first poem. Yes, it was my first audience. He read my first poem. He was the first person to read it. And his objective, like his feedback, was what inspired me then. Though when he died, they were not to return to anymore because one of our brothers moved into his room and they changed the date. So the love notes were no longer there. There was nothing to return to any longer. Then I have no choice than to return to poetry because it is through writing that I remember him. It is through writing that I touch his absence, that I keep his memories alive. So that was when my practical engagement with poetry started. When I started writing poetry fully after his demise. I think that should be 2021 or 2020. Yeah. So that was what inspired my poetry, my personal loss. The absence or presence of my brother to fit in it.
That's actually very wonderful. You know, there is this theory that there is one or two things that push poets or writers to write. For some, it is depression. For some, it is love. For some, they just need a place to actually find joy. And yes, while you were talking, I noticed you talked a lot about your brother. And as a reader of your works, and also evident in this collection, we noticed that there's this recurrent discussion about your brother. How has it shaped your writing so far? Should we expect to see more of this kind of collection from you? Or probably in the future, you might decide to change and approach writing through some other theme or other subject matter?
Okay, as far as I'm concerned, I always write about myself. Because there is this thing that comes with writing, especially poetry. When you don't have purpose, when you are writing and you don't know why you are writing, you won't go far. That is it. So my own purpose of writing is myself, is my personal experience. So, and the substantial amount of my personal experience draws or originated from his loss. So I would always write about his presence and absence as far as I'm concerned. So this is one of the many books you should expect about his demise. So if you are hoping that my future works will not be about him, then you are mistaken definitely. Because Tyrese Obrumo mentioned something. Tyrese Obrumo was one of the, I think the last two, I think he won Sillerman Prize for Poetry 2 years ago. You mentioned something about being true to yourself, about adding your voice. I think that is my voice. Do you get it? So I can't write without my voice. I can't sound like any other person. If I'm writing about love, if I'm writing about even my love poems are written to him. I address my love poems to him. So if I'm writing about love, about desire, about displacement, about grief, anything I'm writing about, all points to the fact that he's absent or he's present. That is it. Yes.
Thank you for that honest answer. And yes, the truth about the truth in the voices. And this brought me to this question. And also, I'll be taking the opportunity because while he was talking, he actually touched something in me. Because one of my favorite poems in this collection is titled "Ode to the Bullets That Killed My Brother." And there is one thing that is very specific about this work. I will feel like this work started with desire, then it ends with grief. And for this, I'll be reading the poem, then I'll be going on to my question. So the title is "Ode to the Bullets That Killed My Brother." Okay, for those that have the book, this page 11. Okay, the poem goes as thus. This morning, I woke up confessing my sin to my mother. Ma, I parted our lips, then said, last night, I asked my girlfriend for a kiss. She refused, saying that it was too much of an intimacy to bear. And because she didn't want it, I couldn't have it. Tell me, ma, if something as little as two lips unifying in sin requires consent, how rebellious? How rebellious then is the bullet that hits my brother? How unholy. Crusty-eyed, she looked at me in silence, the silence loud as the answers I need. Now this brought me to my question. How are you able to juxtapose, like to transit from this kind of emotion? You know, we are trying to, when we start this poem, for people that have yet to read this poem before, when we start to read this poem, we feel like you are trying to bring us into a world of romance. You are trying to bring us into a world of love. How were you able to transition from that world to a world whereby we are transitioning immediately to a world of, let me say, grief, without any shock? You know, there's this theory that if you actually pull a plant from the ground by force, then definitely there will be shock. But then you are able to do this with tenderness. How are you able to do that?
Okay, that was a very beautiful question. I was seriously expecting this question. I was expecting it. Okay.
How many times do you want to give us? There's a lot of questions.
We want to go and pray.
Okay.
So we can have the interview.
Okay. Like I said earlier, that was a very interesting question. I was expecting it. Like I mentioned earlier, even in my love poems, I talk about the loss of my brother. And that particular poem, the incident that happened that warranted that poem, that pushed me, that motivated me to write that poem, was that I was with this person, of course, already. I was with this person, and we're talking. Then she mentioned something about, okay, we talked about it, and she mentioned something about romance, about intimacy, about asking for permission first. Then I was like, if there is something as little as two lips unifying a sin, because it doesn't take anything to please anyone, of course. Like, not just for this to talk, that requires consent. How rebellious, how audacious is that bullet? How audacious is that bullet that hit my brother? Because, okay, for clarity's sake, there is both a lie and a truth to that piece. The lie is that my brother did die by bullet shots, and the truth is that there was a lady and there was a discussion about this. Okay, now the intersection is this is where the intersection comes in. It requires consent, right? It requires consent. Then, for someone to fire a shot, for someone to shoot a bullet to another person, should also require a lot of permission, a lot of consent. You get it? So, if something as little, sorry, I use the word little in that poem. I don't know if that sounds something. I'm waiting for my apologies, but that was what I thought. I use the word little because it's little compared to killing someone. For someone to take another person's life, it requires a whole lot of consent. And now this person is saying, for them to be a kid, they have to consent. I was like, how audacious, how confident are you? How brave? So that was what warranted the point. And the reason why I infused that imagery of my brother into the poem was because at any point in time, especially when I'm writing, the first person that comes to mind is my brother, of course. And that is why that poem was meant to be a love poem, but at the end, I made it a group poem. I made it look like I was greeting someone, of course, which is my brother. So that was what happened. That's how I was able to balance that fusion between love, about romance, desire, then grief and longing. That was what happened. Have I answered the question?
Yeah, you have, and I'm sure the audience too have been answered.
Okay.
The next, there's this theory about the poet. The theory goes as the poem must conform to the truth, and the truth must conform to the poem. And whenever I think about it, it always puts me in a case of how is it possible? Because we talk of most people believe that if you are going to write poetry, you also need to be imaginative. But while you are answering your question, I was able to pick one or two things that shows that sometimes we don't even really control our art. It has to control us. And most times, our voices usually influence what we write. Now, the next thing I want to ask about is about hope. Because when we read some of your poetry, let me cite example of Final Dialysis on page 13. While you were talking about the dates, you ended the poem by saying, Papa said he looked into his eyes and whispered, I will be fine. Even in his eternal slumber, it takes the meaning of his name, Mubarak, peace, blessing. Now, there are other places too, like Radiance, whereby you talk about how people should see you. They should see you as a light, as hope. How do you think that hope in poetry has to solve the problem of grief? Because when we look at the way Nigerian poets are thriving, we are mostly thriving on... We are mostly thriving on grief. And for you to thrive on grief, you need to have a little bit of hope at the least. So how do you think hope has to solve the problem of grief while writing?
Okay. If you remember vividly, in your first question, I started to answer your question. Your first question was what inspired my poetry, right? Then I told you that it's the laws or the presence of the African. So hope. What I from this context, what you meant by hope, if I should understand it clearly, should be okay. Let's say, you know, I've experienced loss like every point have. So when I started writing,
Let's continue.
the happenings, the eternal positions that has to do with the mundane, the ordinary, and the events of writing, of course. So when you are writing, you said, what was the question again?
The question is, how does hope resolve the issue of grieving while writing poetry?
Okay. First and foremost, grief is universal, right? Everyone grieves. You believe that? So by writing about grief, I've written about the grief of others, about a million others. You know. By writing about grief, I'm not just writing about myself. I'm not just writing about my personal grief, but that of a million others, because grief is universal. I'm not the only person grieving. I'm not the only person that lost someone. So I hope, I have it in mind that somehow, relate with my own loss and find solace somewhere. That is hope for me. You get it? Yes.
Yeah, thank you for that honest answer. And this is going to move me to the next question, because while you were talking about personal grief, you also talk about collective grief. And this brought me to the situation of poems like Scarecrows, whereby you talk about how cruel the situation of those living around your areas are. You were talking about insecurity. How has this, in any way, because while you were talking earlier, you talk about the fact that even though your brother is dead, he did not die true bullet. So, I'm sorry for asking that personal question. I hope you don't mind. So it brought me to these questions that, how has the environment you actually grow in, how has it influenced your craft? Like, you know, really poems like Scarecrows and others, people see this influence. So how has it influenced your writing?
Okay. There are many concepts, there are many variables that influence the art of writing, poetry per se. And part of which are your immediate environment, your personal experiences, and that of others. So, Coincidentally for me, both so coincidentally for me, they were the influence of my personal experience and the socio-political happenings in my immediate environment. I'm very, very much happy to be having this panel discussion with you because you could relate to the happenings in our place. We come from the same place. So you know what happens, you know how hard it is to survive in that space. So it is very, very hard to write about something else without that influence of my environment in it. There are issues of socio-political happenings like banditry, kidnapping, human trafficking, and the rest, but at the end of that is banditry. So, while writing about my personal loss, I also try to navigate these happenings to infuse them into my writings. So that, because I don't just write my personal experiences, I write for posterity's sake. I write for people to return to my writings, even like 100 years to come, 200 years to come, and find a piece of pen in it. You get it? So if I'm just writing about my personal experiences, people only relate to their personal experiences, not where I come from. So I want people to see themselves, their environment in my writings. So that is why I write about the social-political happenings in my environment, so that the coming generation will know better the past generation.
Thank you for that honest answer. As much as possible, I would love to have this conversation going, and I have a lot of questions in mind while going through this work. But then, I think I will be shifting it down to 3 questions, and then we'll be coming to an end of this book discussion. And out of the 3, the first one I would love to ask is, a very interesting question was asked yesterday during the virtual discussion, and the question goes as follows: if you were to invite during Nigerian poetry to an event organized by yourself, just during Nigerian poets over poetry overseas, who would those poets be and why?
Okay, does that include the writers in the diaspora? Like those?
Yeah, okay, I'm going to expand the scope.
Okay, you expand the scope.
Yeah, exactly.
Alright. So if you want to limit it, you can limit it. Are you sure you want to?
I don't want to mention my name.
Okay, first and foremost, Michael Emerson. I would love to have Michael Emerson. Then Sadiq Sukogi. And who should be?
Or do you want me to increase the number?
No. Okay, Chiwelite Onyekwelu. Chiwelite Onyekwelu, Michael Emerson, and Sadiq Sukogi. They are points I would love to have a discussion with them. Of course. Any day, anytime.
Okay. Thank you. I would love to have a discussion with them too. If you want to have a discussion with them, but I can't find what you want to say to them. Okay. The next question I want to ask is, while writing this work, are there times that you actually break down? Because when we read this work, it's even as a reader, when you read the collection, you have this intense read. You feel like this collection is talking about me. You feel like, oh, am I the one this thing is happening to? How, like, are there times like that, and how are you able to navigate through it?
Okay. By breaking down, you mean cause or like be affected by the trauma, by the depressed. Okay, that's what you meant. Of course, but for me to write about grief means I've accepted the fact that there is grief. You get it? In my poems, what I'm trying to do is, my aim is to invite grief, to have a conversation with grief, not to blame it, not to judge it, but understand it. You get it? So I am not writing. Of course, there are times when you'll be writing and you will be like touched by the whole process, but that is the reason why. Those are the reasons why I'm writing. So by writing, I expect that there is grief, because Samuel Betiku said something during the virtual book reading. He said there is this profundity that comes with writing grief. For someone to write about loss, it means they have accepted that loss. Because nothing lasts forever, but you can hold on to it a little longer. So I don't, okay, everyone break down, but I don't let that come between me and my work. I have accepted my fate, I've accepted that there is grief, because I'm not the only person that lost. Everyone lost one person or the other. So I'm just trying to understand, to heal. I'm trying to have a conversation with you to just understand it. That is, I'm not trying to blame, I'm not trying to break down further because I'm already broken. So I'm not trying to break further. Though there are points in time during it, because I didn't set out to write a book. The points in this book were a compilation of my previous poems and some new poems. So I didn't just say, okay, let me just write a book. No. I saw a call for publication, asking for manuscript submission, then I compiled my poems and sent it. So I set out to write, okay, for this month, for this week, I'm going to be writing about my book. I'm going to be writing about so. Then maybe the influence would have been bigger. So the fact that I didn't set out to write a book, but just made a compilation of poems to make a child book, made the influence, the depression a little smaller.
Yeah, thank you for that honest answer. There's this theory that says that writing is therapeutic, and I remember one of my favorite poets, Abdul Bassad, who says that what is broken will never be broken again.